content of this channel is for mature audiences. Parental discretion is advised. You're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell notification button. And please, feel free to share the video. Thank you.
What's good, everybody, man? I'm GG, man. You tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel. It's the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, with no chasers, man. Straight up. And before I get things started, I'm going back to back, you know. Like Drake said in the song, I'm going back to back. But before I get things started, the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to all the ops and the haters out there. I hope you're having a good evening. You know what I'm saying? It is evening time on the East Coast, so whatever the case may be. Big up to the haters, man. And if you haven't done so already, man, make sure you hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, subscribe. If you haven't hit the bell notification button and you've subscribed, then you're tripping because you're not able to stay abreast of what's cracking here on the Green Gorilla channel. And like I always do before every stream, I promised that I would do it for all the members. I'm gonna give them a shout out. So shout out to Lee Ways, Electrician 480, Gabinga, Herbert Lewis, Cutting Up with the Jones, Zanko, D. Scott, Julius Ferguson, and Lord Hamal. Big up. Big up to Path Guy 74, Black Swerve 404, Pete Rock, Tahuti, Gold Professor, Brotherly Love, Aaron Peters, Barnolas, hiphop.ca.tv, and Dardar. Big up. Big up to Michael Ross, Vincent Lindsay, Michael Pierce, Beautiful Trauma, Quiz the Poet, Black Quizzer 80OS, Jazz Tech, Shadow Observer, Sugar T, and Artisan MC. Big up! Big up to Nasiana, Kyle J. Sura, Kareem, Troy Warren, Jeff R., Mrs. KP Bailey, Ricky Dawson, Alan Wiley, DeFace, and Mantis on break. Boom! Big up to Life of Commerce, True 7360, Marvin Evans, A. Wilson's Ghost, Timothy Blewett, Jeffrey Speed, Marvin Battle Jr., Mark Holt, and John J. Big up. Big up to Afro Troop TV, Adam, BGS Ibmore, Ignatz Mouse, Brian Peaks, Papa Dida, Scott Haywood, Black Uru Strikes, Dr. Tree 33, and Leroy Honeycutt. Big up. Big up to Broken Blaze, Supertech, 77 Base X, Brian McMurray, Karen S, Anthony Davis, Seven Coast Dojo, Charles Rogers, Rick Ross, and Sandra Jean. Big up! Big up to Charles Gilmore, Patricia Colley, Greg, Barry Little, Mr. Valentino, Jason Hales, Black Men Being Brutally Honest, Cameron 87, Dr. Rock, and Mark Swift. Big up! Big up to Odd Collar, Donald Watts, Coach Hotep, Old Soul Chief, Mr. Blue Collar, I'm Just Jules, TD Hip Hop Media, Drew Main, Mr. Heat, and Sir Anthony. Big up! Big up to MLR, Universal 178, Rasheed Barnes, Aaron Smith, DH, C Truth the Revelator, Aaron Infinite, Dr. Tiasan Johnson, Kalonja Kala, Hostile Adep, and W. Pierre 1. Big up! And on the Patreon side, big up to Rashawn Phillip, Keith Bass, Nick, Malcolm Smith, Rock One, Albert C, Dr. Ben Vincent, I Am the Light of My Father, Waffle Weave, William Joyner, Tyrone Hampton, Darnell Smith, Excalibur, Anu 219, Pursuer Prisoner, Taz, Dragon 59, Adrian Hicks, Jay Bailey, Mr. Michi, NEU Momal, and the Sangwa. Big up! And I can't forget my brothers in heaven, Forrest Windu, David Carroll, and Kevin Samuels. Big up! Y'all all deserve a round of applause, man, a round of applause. And if you're wondering how you also can contribute to keeping this dang gone channel going, man, this thing called the Green Gorilla channel, here's how you do it.
What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I want to introduce you to my new membership program that consists of 5 levels where you can invest in the Green Gorilla channel on a monthly basis and receive level-specific perks. Memberships are special because they improve the quality of the content of the channel and will help me to be able to keep the channel going. Now, to participate in the Green Gorilla Channel membership program, all you have to do is hit the join button, which is located right next to the subscribe button on my channel page. Now, for all of my subscribers who decide not to participate in my membership program, nothing will change. The content will keep coming the way it always has. Thanks for watching, and be careful out here, people. Bless.
Yeah, baby. We're going back day. And I brought some guests here with me. I got my man from the mighty Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Sandog. And I got my brother, my intellectual brother, man, who was snapping yesterday, man, on BGS's stream. It's called the Nameless Protagonist. What's cracking with you, Nameless?
To the chat and the instructors on the panel. Os.
Now, Sandog, man, is the individual who's put, this particular segment together, and it's entitled Back When We Were Men. And the subject matter or the topic of discussion is the era of Reconstruction. We've been going over the various segments in our history, the various, times in our history where black men actually did not sit on their hands, did not, be idle or sit idle and wait for things to happen, but made things happen such that we can actually be where we are today so that we can move the program even further. So, this is all about Sandog presenting information to let you know the various ways in which black men actually have been active in their own freedom and their own elevation. And we've also brought into the conversation my brother, Nameless Protagonist, who I haven't had the opportunity to speak with in quite a bit of time, but I'm so glad he's here. So welcome, gentlemen. Welcome to the Green Gorilla channel, man.
Yo, GG, what's going on, fam? You know what I'm saying? It's always good to have a groove with you, man. You know what I'm saying? Shout out, and Nameless Protagonist, man. Shout out to you, man, for joining me on this one.
Man, all I can say is behold how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity.
That's why we call it the dojo, fam. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
Again, as far as I see it, man, our experience here makes sense if you look at us through the eyes of a prisoner of war as men. And if you look at the women as being individuals that are concubines as a result of that conflict, it contextualizes everything.
Uh-oh. Hey, we done already dropped a few gems on you. Boom.
Just calling it like I see it, family.
Already dropped a few bombs on you. So, Nameless, not Nameless, but Sandog, kind of give us articulation and an adumbration of what we've done thus far and where you intend to go with us today. And I'm gonna let y'all, for the most part, kind of take over, and I will be interjecting often, but I kind of want y'all to take over, man, and give us the information that you have at your fingertips, because people get tired of hearing GG sometimes, man.
Nah, man. Again, me and Names were talking about it because we're here to kind of tag team it, right? To talk about what animated the action and then what the reaction is. And so today, like I said, I'm going to do a rehash of, the Confederate States of America. And so basically, again, as most of you know, that this is all about changing the narrative, right? That black men didn't just sit on their hands in the United States. And then also the fact that, it is important to look at the civilizations that we may have come from, such as Benin or the Mali Empire or the Sungay Empire or back to ancient Egypt, but also to show you that the men here, although they were bought in chains, are equally or even more so responsible for creating high civilization as well. So, like I said, so this was a narrative, like I said, so this is a narrative that, say one that we would like to change. And Gigi, thank you for giving us the platform, and talking about, basically, how African American men have shaped and evolved Western society. And so going back to what we was talking about last week, a lot of people, especially since desegregation, a lot of us have had so many different experiences in America, and the fact that there have always been several Black Americas. A lot of us, especially after desegregation in the civil rights era, we kind of scatter to the four winds, go to our different parts of the country, and then we all have different experiences with the United States and the institutions thereof. And so, for many people, there are many people out there that really don't know or won't accept that racism exists until it comes to their front doorstep, right? So, you may have somebody who may be highly successful and they may say, I've seen success all my life. I don't know what race is, up until, you live in some high value neighborhood and the cops won't let you in your own house,
They call,
right?
you
And
know what
so
they call that, right?
the
They
wake up
call that a
call,
nigger. They call that a nigger moment.
yeah.
The nigger moment.
Also known as getting your white supremacy lottery ticket pulled.
Hey, look, shout out to Dor, man. And also, I want to give a shout out to Drew Main, man. They all bless me. They each bless me. Thank you so much for your contributions. And, every little bit helps, man, to keep me, going and to keep this boat afloat, man. So appreciate that support. There is a sociologist, and his name is Elijah Anderson, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm looking it up now. Elijah Anderson. In the nigger moment, like it's a real thing. Like you think I'm playing with you, man. This is a real thing. Watch, I'm gonna show it to you. Cause the nigger moment, like it a lot of guys think they can escape the nigger moment. But hey, you keep living long enough into the United States, that nigger moment will catch up with you. Ben Carrington on Twitter, Elijah Anderson talks about his nigger moment of acute racial disrespect. Now, if you don't know who Elijah Anderson is, he's a sociologist, and he hails from, but he's like, he OG, man, Yale University. There's Pick is, you know what I'm saying? So the whole concept of the nigger moment is something that he wrote about, and loosely, some of his musings have been turned into TV shows. Like one of the most notable shows is The Wire. You know what I'm saying? So in case you didn't know, The Wire is loosely based around some of his sociological findings. You know what I mean? So, and I had the opportunity to meet him on several occasions, man.
Oh, that's pretty
Chat with him
dope.
over lunch and dinner. You know how at the universities they do the brunch shit like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, have kick it with him and kick the Willy Bobo and talk about I've had several nigger moments. I don't know about you.
Day
Yes,
in
sir.
the life,
I'll tell you
family.
what, man. More than I actually care to mention, right? Because especially in my walk of life, right, I've always been the only one in the room. So, yeah, man, there's been quite a few. But when you get to it, and that's what I was trying to say. So, what I wanted people to know is that, like I said, in the United States, so when you get to the Confederate States of America and their reasons for succession, again, you get into agitation for taxation, and some people, I remember earlier in the chat, you would have somebody to say that, that taxation had almost sparked off the Civil War before, but at the end of the day, the complaint of that taxation is based upon the money, is based upon the money that these people are making with slavery, right? So, so at the end of the day, prior to America becoming a nation, for the most part, America at this time is almost like separate corporations with various different business interests, right? And so when you get into any entity from the federal government that wants to tax the southern states, that's agitation over the money that they're making for slavery, right? So again, because at that particular time, this is this is pretty much where the South makes their money, right? And so then you get the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, and that's deemed as a blow to white supremacy. So that agitates the South and the institution of slavery, right? And so also Abraham Lincoln's platform, what does it also do, right? It also opposes the expansion of the Southern style slavery into Western territories, right? And so this is where you get caught up like prior to it, right? You would have things like the Kansas Nebraska Act, right? When people are trying to figure out, okay, what's going to happen with slavery in terms of westward expansion, and then you have people in Missouri and other states who have already made a compromise before, about not allowing slavery, and everything else. And so between in the North, you would have white people who want to expand west, right? And it's not necessarily in terms of freedom for the Negroes or to save them from persecution. It's the fact that they don't want to compete with them. So the same money that people are making in the South with the black slaves, they're like, okay, if we make that territory free, then white people could work those lands and then individually or collectively, make the same, make the same amount of money. And also, leading up to the Civil War in Congress, you would have something called the gag rule, man, what from 1836 to 1844, where you couldn't even mention slavery. So you couldn't even come into the House of Representatives or into the Senate and even complain about it, and that
Wow.
wasn't until, yeah, man, it's
Now,
called the
one
gag
thing
rule.
I want you to do, Sandog, get closer to your microphone so that people can hear you more clearly.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, man, but just make sure you keep that presence, that projection, my brother.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So again, so now that you have the gag rule, right? And the gag rule sounds a lot like in a way, it sounds a lot like the policy of benign neglect, shout out to Nixon, right? And so this is, all of this stuff is foundations for succession, right? And then for people who are non-believers, right? When you talk about the Confederacy and uh, where it stood is that you would have Alexander H. Stevens, the vice president of the Confederate States of America, right? And, he gave a speech in Savannah, Georgia. And what he said was, our new government foundations are laid. Its cornerstones rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is its natural and normal condition. This, our new government, is the first in history of the world based upon this great physical, philosophical, and moral truth, right? And so basically what he's saying, and then also with the biblical verse to justify it, right? So he justified this with the Bible verse of Psalms 118, right? When it was talking about, the capstones being rejected by the builders, right? And it goes, our confederacy is founded upon principles in strict conformity with these laws. And this stone was rejected by the first builders and has become the chief of the corner, the real cornerstone in our new edifice, right? And so now he's talking about the fact that, again, in slavery, this is where America initially generated its money, generated its wealth. And then now you have these people in the North who now want to reject this institution. And from his point of view, right, it's also seen as hypocritical because, hey, you don't mind taking taxes from us, and money from us, and everything else. But at the same time, you reject our way, as they would say, our way of life or the institutions in which we live. And so what he's saying is that again, so what he's saying is that the Confederate States in all actuality will be the first nation to, for the most part, is the first nation where that's based completely on white supremacy, right? So this is actually what he's communicating, that America or the Confederate States of America will be the first of its kind to actually, quote and unquote, knowledge white rule over other groups of people, right? And so later on, when the crap hit the fan. He would claim to have been misquoted, but this was his stance. Right? You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right.
You'll say, yeah,
Don't
this
forget
was
the
a
effect of Dred Scott during this time period, also, as well as the interpretation of the definition of citizen.
Yeah, go ahead and
correct.
give us some insight into that,
Yeah, yeah,
Nameless.
yeah.
So we have this big question during this time period around what constitutes as a citizen, specifically because at the time the Constitution really only defined citizen as white male. And at this time period, you did have individuals that were free, who were previously slaves, individuals that one way or another found their emancipation. And the question was always, when it comes to the right to sue, things that are protected in the Bill of Rights, do Black people qualify? And when it came down to deciding whether or not, Black people qualified, more specifically Black men, qualified for the right to count as a citizen, Supreme Court ultimately just sided with this idea of defining the concept of the American family. And Black people were not included in that classification or definition as a legal context. Prior to the end of the Civil War, and we're going to get into that in a little bit once Sandog finishes with the preamble to this, I want people to consider the Dred Scott case and understanding that definition of citizen, since it was so far back, is providing the cultural inertia to define whiteness as synonymous with citizen. That's the precedent I want to press forward here. And that's what's going and playing in the background that contextualizes these conversations going forward.
Facts. And so yeah, and so again, so even when you get to the general of the Confederate, the Confederacy himself, and you talk about Robert E. Lee. So remember, there were two types of Reconstruction, right? So the first was this kind of Andrew Jackson based Reconstruction that was sympathetic or empathetic towards the South. And this is what Robert E. Lee himself supported, right? Because it would give the Southern states autonomy on deciding the fate of Black people, or how they will be managed, how they will be managed going forward, right? And so again, this was something that that the government was in favor of until you had the Memphis riots in 1866 and the New Orleans massacre, right, which all happened May or across the summer or so, as I can remember during that year, right? And so in the Memphis riots, again, you had an altercation between some Black veterans and white policemen. And so pretty much it ended up with white people, for the most part, going into that part of Memphis, Tennessee, and just ransacking the Black people completely until the federal government came down there to quell the violence. And so in the midst of that, you would get like what, maybe 46 dead Black people, 75 people injured, 100 people robbed, some women raped, and then a lot of the Black people there never to return to the town again, right? And so now you're beginning to see where these people in the South really stand in terms of their relationships with Black people. And then you would have the same thing. So the New Orleans massacre, 1866, you had the Republican Party of Louisiana, again, the Negro Republican Party, where they were protesting the fact that you have people within the state of Louisiana that wanted to enact the Black codes, right? And for people who are not familiar with the Black Code, was the Black Code was something, in a sense, it kind of already existed within the slave doctrine that existed, like the 1705 slave codes. And basically what it did was so this is the precursor to Jim Crow. And so what it did was it restricted Black people's rights to own property, conduct business, buy and lease, or move through public spaces. And so, like, let's say, for example, if me, Gigi, and Nameless was chilling on a corner, right? Some white guy would come and say, "Hey, you boys got a job?" And if we said no, guess what? We would go to prison or jail or prison, and then before you know it, we'd be sharecropping somewhere, right?
Right,
So
right.
basically, you know what I'm saying? So basically, what it was is that it was a way to kind of railroad you back into the plantation, back into free labor, and it was also like a loophole it was a loophole in a sense to kind of overlook, just like what Name was saying with the Dred Scott decision. So it was a loophole in a sense to kind of work its way around the 13th or 14th Amendment. So I'm not, so
Let
I'm
me
trying to hold. Yeah, because that's what I was saying, Nameless, because I
Okay,
don't want
okay,
to steal your
okay.
thunder. Yeah.
Well,
So that's
no,
what I'm
because I
trying to
want to
say.
go back
Yeah.
to the beginning because it's the outline phase. But go ahead, fam.
Yeah. So yeah, and again, because I just want, because what I want, Nameless, is I want to set sword form one. I want to give people what the foundation of all this stuff is and what people believed at that time. Right. So although you would get people, Robert E. Lee would talk about how the nation needed to heal and how the union had to come together. Robert E. Lee himself, right? Robert, although he spoke with a softer tone and said people should act civilly or civil in a civil manner or gentlemanly, again, he also believed that black people were too dim-witted. So, okay, you can educate the blacks, but they can't be allowed to vote because, again, they're not intelligent, they're not intelligent, and to
Foundations of
allow them to
scientific racism. Look,
correct.
we got to remember Darwin's work is coming out around this time period. We got to remember
Correct.
that. And a lot of the
Correct.
rhetoric that you're talking about, Sandog, they were leaning on science to actually validate a lot of those claims and justify them. So when we
Yeah.
talk about getting into later, a lot of the political organizations that are funding and political thought at the time, the impetus for that, the trajectory of launch is coming from these forms of thinking that to this day are still being influenced by it. So when people make these goofy statements like, okay, that was in the past, it doesn't matter. No, this is the default setting that people are making reference to our existence here in this country. And we need to understand that Black men in particular are focused and targeted on from the onset. It is the beginning workings of eugenics, idealism, and thought.
And one of the things that's very important for people to understand, right? So even within the context of the conversation recently that was conducted between Umar, Hope Giselle, Cynthia G, and the other moderator on Fox Soul, right? One of the claims that's often made is, okay, well, what are black men doing in order to improve their lot and their condition? Like moving back to the past is not really sufficient because we moved past the past. We're here now. Okay, so because we're here now, we have to talk about what black men are doing now. And it seems like black men are doing nothing now, right? But, my viewpoint on all of that is, look, the past has a reverberation into the future, okay? What has occurred has a way of reappearing, emanating forth in the present. Now you can try to deny it and try to downplay it, and I know that there's the immediacy of now. We get that, okay? We understand that, but without understanding the exigencies of the past, you can't make a competent and a pragmatic program for the future. It's fucking impossible, okay? And so, what my thinking is that we haven't even explored our past in a meaningful, in a substantive, and in a proactive way. We're just kind of fumbling around and utilizing, in many ways, the same language as our oppressors. Mm-hmm. Oh, niggas ain't shit. Niggas is so fucked up. Niggas ain't doing this and that. You niggas is backwards. And then you hear women say it while proclaiming their own magicality, as if there's like some sort of fucking pixie dust somewhere that they're able to use, just on the account that they got a vagina. And now you got trans women saying this shit, and I don't even know if they got bottom surgery. They saying this shit like, well, them bumpkinish niggas ain't doing nothing. You niggas ain't magical like us. So the question is, why are black men consistently being bombarded with these, caricaturizations about our agency and the denunciation of, our previous accomplishments and even the things that we're doing now and the measures that people are utilizing and they're taking to stymie our forward progress. Okay.
And real quick, I want to say this because I want to augment your point. I put a link in the chat also there to Elliott wave theory, and all my investors already know what that's about. If you want a real life example of people putting money down where it counts to predict trends on virtually any modality where human beings are involved, The Elliott wave theory is the definition of looking to the past to gain an inference on what's going on in the present and then make educated assumptions on what's about to happen into the future. I can't think of any professional region that doesn't have, they've been able to turn this into an algorithm at this point. So what we're talking about is not just conjecture and just whatever. A culture stays in motion until a greater force or greater culture acts upon it to change otherwise.
Inertia.
It's the same principle.
Again, like here's the thing, right, Gigi? And to answer both of your questions, you have to remember most Americans or our community specifically, right? So when you talk about racism and what it is, right? What the Nameless say, right? Prisoners of war, and then you're also talking about the main reason why racism exists is because it enables people to make money, right? And so so now what are we incompetent in? People are financially illiterate. So what happens is in the world of money, the past, present, and future all exist at the same time. If you take a finance 101 class, the first formulas you're going to learn are the past, present, or the past, current or present, or future value of a dollar. That's what you're going to learn, right? So that and foremost, even within money, all of those things exist simultaneously. So for a lot of us, check it out. There's a credit report, right? So if you want a house, right, or if you want to start a business, that banker is going to look at a history of what you've done with money, and or you'll say with money or credit, and make a determination on if you're worth this loan or not, or this credit card or not, based upon that, based upon that past performance. So all of these things, and even in warfare, any strategist or tactician worth his salt is also a historian. So the reason why America didn't take 75-ton Abram tanks to Afghanistan is because that we learned from the Russians that that doesn't work in a mountainous environment, right? It's nonsensical. It is completely nonsensical to dismiss uh, history when you're trying to plan on what you're going to do for the future. Hello.
Hey,
Yeah,
wait a
we're
minute.
here, fam.
Hold on. I stepped away because I had to take a leak real quick, but I heard everything. And look, let me just say this.
Yeah.
These are words coming from an officer in the military who used to perform engagements and tactical maneuvers on the enemy of the United States. So he's not talking idle talk. This ain't just some nigger shit, like just being kicked off, extemporaneously. This is a military technician telling you, if you're going to perform on the theater of war, you have to know what the enemy has done in the past and what they're doing now so that you can project the plan for the future. The same is true of sports. What defense
Correct.
was being utilized against us in the first or the second half of the game? Okay? How can we counteract it at the current moment? All of these factors come into play. It's nonsensical. Yeah, we have to develop extemporaneous and, improvisational strategies, but they have to be intelligent. They can't just be ad hoc strategies that's being utilized. We have to understand what the tactics of the enemy are.
Even
You have to
boxers
know
do
that.
this.
Yeah, because here's the thing, and I get it. Like I remember last night, when Nameless went off on the BGS thing. So what happens is that there are a lot of people who have observed our condition, and they're frustrated, and their emotions are talking in front of them, right? Instead of the facts and what the realities are, on the ground. So when you heard Nameless and BGS and their agitation, because you have people who come up there who don't know our history, unfortunately, and haven't read it, and they're trying to and they're making these same determinations, like you're weak, or you haven't done anything, when there have already been multiple or several attempts. And so I think, and this is what I was trying to get at. And so one of the main problems that we have in this space, and I remember I was talking to Art about it one time, about like actually And like I said, it's boring because, for a lot of guys, if you're not talking about women, they're not going to listen. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about is how institutions are formed and how institutions actually shape cultures, right? So when you go from family, a family institution, business, corporate, or even government, right? So these are things that are discussed. These are things that will be discussed in certain fields of study like macroeconomics, organizational behavior theory, psychology, so on and so forth. So even in my current line of work, or even in the military, I had to understand institutions, right? Because in warfare, you just don't shoot up buildings and people. You also could attack somebody's economic system. You could attack their culture, right? And so again, this is it's not as and so for many of us, when you don't have that competency in front of you, and you have your emotions and your feelings, these are the personalities that you're engaging in the space.
Look, one thing, okay, I got a PhD in philosophy. Really, I'm not bigging it up, but one of
Yeah.
the things that you learn, even in ancient times, they understood this shit. Like starting back with Aristotle. I mean, here's a guy who's basically like the most important science is the science of politics or the study of the polis, which creates laws and institutions, economic arrangements. It develops, what trajectory the state will put its energy and effort into among the sciences, the crafts, and so on and so forth. If you don't understand law, institutions, and policies, and the way that they all cohere in order to create,
Shape culture.
to shape behavior and activity in and of itself. If you don't understand that and you don't get that, then you'll forever be lost. Like, for example, the state determines what kind of disciplines or areas of inquiry that people will put their energy and effort into. If we say that it's going to be the arts, for example, the United States says, well, we need to revive the arts, then you'll see a different kind of outcome than you see now in the university system, which is, heavily concentrated on promoting business or economics and the sciences, like the natural sciences and so on and so forth, right? So the science of the state is the most supreme and important form of science because it determines the others.
Correct.
And law is primarily the means by which these other areas of performance and the areas of activity or how they're delimited, right? Or how they're actually arranged. And it seems to me like we're lost on this. Like, you got a lot of guys who just subscribe to John Henryism. Like, okay, well, we're just going to say, fuck these bitches, and they're going to just do what we want. How, bruh? How you going to force or constrain the behavior or the activity of the average individual when the entire system that you live in is pretty much nudging them to engage in a specific form of behavior?
Correct.
And it befuddles my brain, man. The guys are so naive.
You know what I call that?
Go ahead.
I call it gynometry. Look, they take 1% and 99% and conflate the two and call it 50% because it ain't zero. That's the problem.
Like
1% and 99 look like 50-50, and so that's how you get the idea of alpha in your way through it. It's a conflation of probability and possibility. And that all stems from not having a macro view of reality, like you were pointing out. Go ahead.
And I'm sorry to interrupt you because I don't get you on the show very often, and I love to have you here, okay?
Appreciate it.
But you have to be mindful of something very simple when even thinking about John Henryism, okay? Which is like alphaing your way through it, like, fuck it, I'm gonna beat this steam drill down. Nigga, if a steam drill is right there in front of you, and you got all of the shit to fuel the steam engine, Why the fuck are you standing in front of a goddamn block of rock trying to break it down with a sledgehammer? Why are you not trying to utilize the technology that's available, or the institutions, the systems, or the mechanisms that are in place? Why are you not trying to utilize them instead of just trying to fucking break down the brick wall with your bare hands? Why? It just makes sense. So you need to understand, like feng shui, what is society ordering in terms of the flow and the ebb of the energy of its citizens primarily? Like, what is it doing? And how can you counteract that if you feel that you need to, efficiently and pragmatically, not morally, not based upon some troglodytish and some errant and absolutely ridiculous caricaturization of what masculinity is? What can you do intelligently as a tactician to manipulate the environment to your liking? What is it that you can do? I'm in favor, like, you know this saying, dog. And I'm going to let y'all have the floor after this because we got to get back on track to talking about Reconstruction. But one of the things that you know, like if I tell some motherfucker that's pledging the frat, and I'm not giving away a secret or nothing, but it's just some hazing shit that everybody does. If I tell somebody a pledge, knock that brick wall down, bro. You got to knock down that wall. If that dumb motherfucker decides that he's going to pick up a sledgehammer and knock down the wall, I'm going to shake my head and laugh, man, while I'm drinking a 40 ounce.
Correct.
I'm going to say this motherfucker's not thinking. He's trying to alpha his way through it. He's trying to use all of his masculine energy to do something that really I'm asking him to be intellectual and to be reflective about it.
Correct.
All he has to do is take his fist and knock on the motherfucking the wall, the brick wall, like somebody knocking on a door. And he's just knocked down the wall. Okay? This is some simple shit. But instead of thinking, using our heads, we want to refer back to or draw upon a caricaturization of masculinity that's going to end up like Nameless just said, killing us, doing stupid shit. There's a difference between virtue and vice, okay? Now, you got to be able to, like Aristotle says, you got to be able to strike the golden mean. You want to be courageous, but being courageous in a war doesn't mean just charging out like a fucking idiot with a musket in front of fucking 100 guys with submachine guns. It's stupid. I mean, yeah, you got to go out, you got to try to subvert the actions of the enemy to some degree, but you have to use intelligence and pragmatic information, you know what I'm saying, about what is pragmatic in order to be effective. Just running and charging out in front of the enemy while they got like fucking hundreds of bullets flying out there is stupid. So we have to be thoughtful and reflective in order to develop a strategy that will actually be effective, bruh. We have to do that. Okay? So I'm gonna leave it to y'all, man.
Yeah. Nah, and so like I said, and so going back into it, and Reconstruction, right? So and I'll hand it over to Nameless because I don't want to take the steam that he's bringing. But even for African American men, at that time, a lot of the people who were running the Confederate government would be, Democrats, and at that time, Democrats were heavily opposed to civil rights. But in the Republican Party, not things were not as rosy as well because the party was fractured in half. So there were people there were people who were moderate or empathetic to the Southern cause or supportive of what was the Southern cause, and then there were people who were uh, opposed to it, flat out. And so these people will be called the radical Republicans, right? And then from there, the black people involved will become the Negro Republican Party or the Black and Tan Coalition that had, again, black and biracial people that would be, in the party. And then the other side of the party, which was labeled by a black Republican man out of Texas by the name of Norris Wright Cunny, right? It was called the Lily White Republicans. And so the Lily White Republicans on their side of the house, again, they were diametrically opposed of black progress. And tell me if this sounds familiar to you. So, you know, with the Lily White Republicans, they would have people, they would have, I'm sorry, so on the radical Republican House side of the House, you would have these group of people called scallywags. And scallywags were Southerners who had sided with the North. And, the scallywags would try to move in to influence the black politics within the Republican Party. And those black men at that particular time, they weren't trying to hear it, right? So this would be kind of like, in a sense, uh, the foundations of liberals, trying to come into African American movements and then influencing those politics. And so what happened was that when the black Republicans or the Negro Republicans at the time uh, blocked them, right? Like, hey, you can't represent us, you can't have the seats, within our districts or whatever the case might be. Those scallywags will then later become hostile to the same group of men that they were pretending to support, right? And so like I said, so in the party, like I said, you now have these splits, right? And so with the you know with the with the lily white Republicans, or they will be supportive of of Abraham's Lincoln's of his legislature. So the Republican Party, or the radical Republicans, put something together called the Wade Davis bill, where it was going to be harsh against the Confederacy. They were going to, again, they would have to convert to a Republican form of government. They will be treated like
Sandog,
traitors.
let me pause
Yeah,
you here because you're getting
yeah,
into it now. Let me start from the
yeah.
beginning because this is a great
Okay,
place to interject, and then we'll
yeah,
contextualize that so people understand
okay,
why that's significant.
yeah,
So let's begin with some presuppositions that are associated with what happened with the Civil War, why, and what in the world was supposed to happen at the conclusion of the Civil War, knowing that Lincoln's objective with his administration was the reassociation and the reassimilation of the Union as soon as possible. That was the goal, first and foremost. So, with having already established the definition of citizen on the condition of being white and male in general within America, I make the assessment that what is understood as the United States was a corporate, put these definitions in the chat for you guys. They were, hit this reset button, copy, there we go. A corporate federation. And it's important to understand the meaning of these terms because you guys talked about states' rights last time. And that's very critical because this continues to become a theme all the way through this time period. The definition, corporate, has several general definitions, but we're going to run with a few of these to understand what the United States, well, what the colonies were in actuality. Formed of an association and endowed by law with the rights and liberties and liabilities of an individual, or relating to a corporation, or having qualities, or rather referring to a informed into a unified body of individuals. In other words, they were here to do business. These colonies had nothing on their mind, had nothing to accomplish and achieve but making money from the host countries that sent them here in the first place, predominantly the British. And we understand a federation, which is a political entity characterized by a union of partially self-governing provinces, states, or other regions under a central federal government, also known as federalism. So if we understand that the entire politics behind the United States was predicated on financial advancement and exploitation of its colonies so that it can send that back in the form of taxes to England, this is what sets the context for the American Revolution and continues to form its corporate entity especially in the South with slavery. Stand by, hold on. Sorry about that. I'm back. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that sets the context for slavery when most of the slavery was abolished in the North because immigrants coming over from Europe couldn't find work. And so by 1790, you've got a majority of the slaves down in there in the South. And there's kind of a conflict of interest going on with regards to the South's representation in the House and the Senate, because they're able to, by virtue of the 3/5 compromise, which is going to come up again in a little bit. And just to give you some context behind that, it was Benjamin Franklin's brilliant idea when they were making the argument, because again, this was a major context as to why the Southern colonies joined the Union when they were getting ready to rebel against Britain. They said they did not want to join the Union if it meant they would have to give up their slaves. As a result, they were arguing over the amount of a vote under which the slaves should count towards the Electoral College, because they agreed that they'll let the slave population count, since at the time a majority of the people were in the North. But they needed to count the slave population, but they weren't going to let that count as a whole vote because they were not classified as citizens. So eventually, after arguing back and forth, Benjamin Franklin proposed the idea of 3/4 or 3/5, which, you know, it wasn't the 3/4 that they originally wanted, but it wasn't the 50% that was being offered on the other side. 3/5 was the compromise, and that stayed written in the Constitution as a means by which those states were willing to join the Union. And this continues to be an issue when we begin to expand more westward, and these colonies that are being, these states that are being formed are having to make a decision on whether or not they want to incorporate slavery, because it provides them an opportunity to exploit their population numbers by letting individuals count as 3/5 of an individual. That gives them the amount of resources they need that they can leverage when they send their representatives to DC to acquire resources. And it's under this context that we get this double dipping of having a slave population in the South. I want to really, let me see, do I have the link? Tell me I didn't get rid of it. May have on accident. I wanted to give a quick comparison to how much money was actually being generated during slavery, so you guys can see. I'll just give you a quick link from the History Channel real quick. Where's the chat at? Right here. You've got a GDP in the southern United States by the 1840s that doubles that of England. I think they're listed as the 5th biggest GDP economy at the time, the 5th largest on planet Earth. The 5th largest.
Facts. Yes.
They had a monopoly over shipping the world's cotton. Now, mind you, you have places that don't get talked about, like Egypt and India, that were huge staples for cotton. The thing is, it was just difficult to grow it where they were. And the United States developed a very specific type of crop of cotton that made it very easy to have a greater yield, and it was easier to cultivate. They had a
not to mention they had free labor.
Correct.
Right.
And Egypt and India didn't make their money until the cotton paused in the South.
Exactly. And we need to understand that we're talking straight bread, just like Sandog was talking about. And it was bread that was supposed to be protected under their idea of states' rights. And so if they can determine and decide how they keep making their bread, if there was ever a situation where slavery went away, they became a third world country overnight, technically. They had a political and financial investment to never give that up. And it's under that context, we've got the conclusion of the Civil War and a group of people here who are facing the reality of potentially being included as citizens and these individuals having to give right of way economically, legally, and politically to people they had formerly enslaved. Now let's get into this Back to Africa movement that I think is very important to understanding why this was fumbled so badly. Originally, when the Declaration of Independence was written out and the drafts for the Constitution were put forward, Thomas Jefferson had a lot to say about the potential of what to do with the Black population that was free. And part of that conversation is how we get Liberia. But there was a decided murmuring, especially from folks in the North, that if the slave population ever got too big, that the mulatto, I guess it was the mulatto mestizo, I guess it's mulatto mestizo. In other words, the mixed population would get so big that it would threaten the idea of whiteness there in the colonies. And they were so terrified about this idea that it was already essentially a running idea in concept, that when the Civil War kicked off, there was a silent understanding that Black folks were not supposed to stay in the United States by and large, and that there were already plans for us to go either to the Liberia, to the colony out there on the continent of Africa, or to initiate a greater plan to expound the railroad system down in Central America near Panama. If you want to understand the idea and the goal behind the Panama Canal, originally in the 1800s, that was a concept that was formulated by the US government. We were originally supposed to be the tools to help implement that. They were going to send us down there to colonize that region and begin construction on that canal and serve as a proxy. That way they could still financially tax us. They would have a proxy so they could reach off to other areas in the world down there, and we'd be too far away from them to serve as the primary threat to, quote, create this the threat of Negro rule, as it's going to be said in term. And that should sound familiar to you, Gigi, because I'm sure that comes up in the feminist doctrines that, you know, are forming at this exact same time period. But Negro rule is a giant phobia. It's the damn boogeyman under the bed at this point. And a lot of what's moving the concern with regards to litigation and legislation is animated on that principle. And so you've got Lincoln that's traveling all around the North, all around different freed regions and location, and operating through the Freedmen's Bureau to convince African Americans to pretty much just go move out the state. We can't live together with one another because one or the other is going to have to disappear. We can't coexist. But we got to also end slavery. That's the general predisposition at this point in time. And it's with that, at the conclusion of the Civil War, that the reality of Black men in particular potentially gaining the classification of citizens becomes a very serious concern. So much so that people in the South are so woed and are so terrified that it actually inspires the dude who kills Lincoln to kill Lincoln within 5 days of hearing it. 5 days.
This is what, look, let me tell you something. Black men, in particular Black men, not Black women, Black men have, this is the story that's not told. If you're playing a chess game and you're trying to get that pawn to the end of the board, okay? Basically, every time we get close to getting to the end of this board, the enemy or the other, like say, for example, we're the Black pieces. The white pieces are doing everything that they can to prevent us from getting the queen. Now, the queen in this case is not necessarily a woman or anything. It's just basically citizenship, okay? Or being respected as a full-blooded citizen in the United States with a full scope and range of the powers that everybody else has, particularly white men have in this motherfucker. This is why you constantly hear, well, all you want to do is be white men. Why would we not? I'm just asking the fucking question. What would we want to be like? White women? What would be our ambition? To be like the least of like to make sure everybody else is good? So the first thing white women started to do was the same shit that white men did. Because they were like, they used the same arguments. Well, if you let these niggas have power, then, you're going to let the savage monkeys rule. That's first wave feminism. Second wave feminism really is no different. If you let these black men have power, they're going to be abusive. And you know what? This is true of white liberals and conservatives. I'm tired of niggas consistently talking about choosing the lesser of two evils. Motherfucker, evil is evil.
Facts.
I just don't understand what people don't get about this shit.
Dr.
I want to choose the lesser of two evils. I saw some shit today, right? I think Dr. Johnson sent it to me about some black woman on some talk show, and they had a panel, and I think Roland Martin was on it, and a couple of other, pundits and people who, talk, and they were talking about Georgia and the courting of the black male vote there, Stacey Abrams, on the account that black male voters seem to have been alienated, like they're diminishing voting for the Democratic Party, right? Because men are like, well, what the fuck is in it for us?
Yep.
And the first thing they'll try to do is say that, well, you're voting for the oppressors when you're voting for the conservatives or the Republicans. And, my thoughts on it are like, look, I do social and political philosophy, okay? The liberals and the conservatives are two fucking parts of the same goddamn whole, man. None of these motherfuckers actually have our best interest at heart. This is why I say, who came up with the bills to put niggas in prison? Who came up with the bill? And who pushed it through? It was fucking the Democrats that did that. Okay?
Shout out to
and it was Southern Democrats who primarily utilized the same language as the conservative party in order to court the conservative vote.
Shout out to the scallywags.
So the very, like, these motherfuckers, this idea, like the black women have, that like, okay, there's the progressive party and then there's the regressive white racist party. Like, do you only see the world in dichotomies and in shades of black and white? They constantly claim that there's fluidity every fucking where else, but in politics. It confuses the shit out of me. I don't understand it, bro. But I do understand it because they're voting for what's in their interest. They give a fuck about what's coming to them. They know that what's coming to them from the Democratic Party is going to be ushered in through the windfalls that accrue to white women. They know that shit. So they hitch their wagon to that. The only problem is we have nothing to hitch our wagon to. Ain't nobody supporting and endorsing us. And what the fuck we need? Nobody. Neither the liberals or the conservatives. So, the conservatives the Liberal Party has gone too far to the left, man. This ain't the Obama's Democratic Party, bro. This shit done went spooky, like straight woke to some place where I've never seen it, bro. I feel like I'm in living color. Like, like it's raining men type shit. Like, this is the new shit we living in. I'm just being honest. Like the liberal on issues that don't matter, like who gets to fuck who, and the politics of recognition are loom large over the Democratic Party. Okay, what the fuck does that have to do with the average black person, man?
Not a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Not at all. Nothing. We have been kicking the can down the road on talking about economic issues in this fucking country for I don't know how long. Because now we caught up in some the politics of who gonna fuck who. And who gonna be acknowledged as being, accepted as a person along gender lines. So we ain't even talking about economics anymore. When the last time you heard a motherfucker talk about economics as it pertains to, like politics?
I don't know. They'll talk about funding bullshit overseas though, but that's about it.
Like, I'm just saying. So at the end of the day, man, I don't want to detract away from the conversation, but it pisses me off to think that our salvation is going to come from the two main branches of the fucking dirty bird. Like we can just hitch our wagons to either one of these parties and the ideals that they, promulgate, and all of a sudden we gonna find some solace from the fucked up shit that we've experienced in this country from the outset. All of this shit has been designed. The feminists, they utilize race whenever they saw fit in order to advance themselves. All of this shit, it's been about blocking your ass from the jump.
And you know what? That's an excellent entry point. Let me go ahead and I'll speed this up because I didn't realize how long we've been talking about this. I don't want to take up everybody's time, but there's so much to cover with Reconstruction. Look, at this time period, during the time when you've got individuals that have been following General Sherman, and if you don't know who he is, he pretty much was the spear tip for the Union military. At the conclusion of the war, General Sherman gave special field orders. It's known as a Special Field Order 15, where he pretty much said, look, all this territory in the South that we've acquired from Confederate territory, we're going to reallocate this to you as spoils of war. You get 40 acres and a mule until otherwise said. Resettle, do what you need to do, and rebuild yourselves as best you can. We'll see what we can do. We'll leave you some token troops so you can make sure that you can do your own thing. And we'll see what we can communicate with Washington. And this was working for a very long time. Like word was spread about the whole, that's where you get the 40 acres and a mule concept. Those mules were leftover resources from the Union Army. A lot of those soldiers didn't go back north. A lot of them stayed there. And you have Black folks starting to resettle in old plantations they used to work at. And you got to remember, at this point, you've got a land that's been at war for 5 years. So a lot of this stuff is completely destroyed and overturned. So Black folks are over here throughout the course of about 6-7 months rebuilding everything from scratch. And for the first time, they've got self-autonomy to be able to function as they desire, as they want. Here's the problem. Because Lincoln got assassinated and the plan to send Black folks overseas was effectively defunct, what you ended up happening was receiving Andrew Johnson. And what's interesting about Andrew Johnson is that he was the only Southern senator that disagreed with the Confederates seceding from the Union. The only one. He's from Tennessee. And he was in strong opposition to the aristocracy in the South that pretty much served as the bulwark for that economic empire we were talking about earlier, known as the planter class. And you got to know about them is that the majority of them were going out of their way to try to defy the typical classism that they experienced while they were over in Europe. They were essentially the individuals that wanted to become their own upper noble class. They created this concept of the Southern belle, the Southern dandy, the Southern sophistication, like all the fetishization and embellishment of the South in general, that came from that individual or that individual group of individuals that pretty much were a bottleneck for all of that power. They also were the key ingredient in comprising a lot of the upper military presence with regards to the Confederate Army. And Andrew Johnson had a very serious issue with them. He didn't like them. He was all about, trying to show and stick up for lower tier, lower key, poor whites in general. But the key thing in that is that irrespective of what was going on, he believed in white people maintaining authority. He did not recognize Black people as being part of the Black family. And he damn sure was not in support of Black men being in any way, shape, or form being seen as a political peer under any context whatsoever. He was a staunch believer in white supremacy, so much so that his whole entire modality of thought at this point in time was to do whatever he could to unite Northern and Southern whites under the context of joining the Union as the United States of America. And he set two separate precedences. Number one, he demanded that if the planter class wanted to receive any sort of pardon for what they did, they had to formally come to the come to the Capitol in DC, acknowledge their defeat, and admit that they were wrong and be willing to accept the new terms of the Reconstruction Agreement with regards to, whatever they decide to have them do down there. They had to submit it in writing, show up in person. They had a whole clerk and all of that set aside for all of that stuff. But in the meantime, these individuals who were the majority of the landowners, they didn't have access to their property. But what ended up happening is this process did take a little while. But eventually, Andrew Johnson got word of a lot of black folks owning, controlling, and working on their own terms the land that they acquired from General Sherman's special orders. And what he was doing was, look, if you sign this treaty of surrender or whatever, an acknowledgement of your defeat, you can get your land back. So there's a particular individual that was subject to this. I'm gonna put a link to his some information on him in the chat. Campbell G. What was it? Campbell Tunis. I always want to say Eunice for some reason. Yeah, Campbell G. Tunis. So, you know, he was a Southern preacher who really went and exonified what we're talking about. You know, he went from taking a group of people who were walking off the plantation, went to one of those islands off the coast of Georgia that you see a lot of the Gullah Geechee at, and built an entire autonomous model of a society that had its own government, it had its own judicial system. White people were not allowed. And the power of that was being enforced by the assistance of the Freedmen's Bureau and the state. And absolutely nobody could come down and really influence that and keep that from happening. The problem is
peep game. Just in case you didn't know, okay, how all this fits together. So Tunis Campbell, the oldest and best known clergyman in the AME Church, or the African Methodist Church, okay? He was a voter registration organizer, a justice of the peace, and the delegate to the Georgia Constitutional Convention of 1867, 1868. He was Georgia State Senator during the Reconstruction era. So niggas ain't done shit, right? They never did anything to try to protect themselves and to resist against their oppression, right? They just kind of laid down and were conquered, right? Even though they just fought in the fucking Civil War in order to free themselves from oppression, what else side was they gonna fight on? You know, I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't, Negroes did fight in the Confederacy, but the lion's share, damn near 1/3 of the fucking Union Army was what?
Black.
Okay?
But actually that point, let's stick with him. And this one thing I want to say, because this is exactly what I was leading to. When they were given the orders from Andrew Johnson to go back and get their territory again, this planter class, when they went through to try to seize those territories, they couldn't do it on their own because he organized them militarily. What they ended up doing was going and getting Black Union troops. These folks got Black Union troops and had the Black Union troops go march on his people, knowing they weren't going to fire on them. And that was how they were manipulating people out of this land and out of their positions and posturing, which forced folks like Campbell to reorganize and go directly through government by virtue of what the Congress was doing at the time. And that's getting into what Sandog was talking about earlier with the radical Republicans. And Gigi, you heard me lose it yesterday on BGS's panel. This is what I was talking about. Nobody in this country got anything done without utilizing the power of the federal government. Reconstruction wasn't possible without having assistance and a staunch objection towards the policies that Andrew Jackson was putting forward. And this dude right here,
he's proof positive of it. He's proof positive of it because ultimately, like, look at his life. Okay, so during Reconstruction, he emerges as a judge, a senator, and he also emerges as an important member of the church because that's the place where you can actually organize people practically and pragmatically. It's a institution that exists that he utilized in order to organize people. He didn't just say, fuck it, I'm going to create some brand new shit. Okay? Also, the man had a 400-member militia. Ready to cap motherfuckers, not talking about the shit, not saying, oh, we need to resist against the white man. Nigga, man, half of these motherfucking niggas saying this shit ain't never slapped a white boy, ain't never pointed a gun at a white boy and ain't did nothing but say sir to them motherfuckers every time they come into contact with them.
Facts.
I'm just being real. So all the, like, for example, Amiri Brown, when the last time you smacked the shit out of a white motherfucker? You ain't never took shit from them. You ain't never told them fuck you. But you want to go to war with these motherfuckers, but you ain't never even slapped the shit out of one of these motherfuckers in your natural life. This is what fucks me up about these pro-black niggas. Now, I ain't saying you should be pro-white or nothing. I'm just saying, come on, man. Like, if you ain't got that energy in you, you ain't got that energy in you, man. You can't just talk about that energy. You got to do something about that energy. Here's a guy that did something about that energy.
Did a lot.
But they still ran his ass out of Georgia. They ran him out of Georgia, and they used niggas to do it.
Yep. Now,
because if they in control of the army, if the federal government tells some niggas right now to move on a urban population in the United States, what you think these niggas gonna do? I'm just being honest here. You are a corporal, a sergeant, a private in the military, and they tell you right now, I want you to go in there and move on these motherfuckers right there. I want you to go get them. What you think's gonna happen?
History repeating itself like we talked about.
I ain't trying to be ignorant by saying this. I ain't trying to denounce nobody at all. All I'm just trying to say is, one of the things you got to understand about military life anyway, as it stands, really for real, is that it's hierarchical for one, and that people defer to authority for two. That's why you think you had Nazi Germany pop off. They done studies on this shit. The Milgram experiment and the Stanford, prison experiment. They done already studies on this. People pretty much, they're gonna, like, if you got a lab coat on and the lab technician tells you, sit over here, sir, your ass gonna go over there and sit.
Yep. Yep.
You understand what I mean? So but you had a man who, for the most part, everybody said the church was the worst thing that could happen to Negroes, right?
Allegedly.
But here you got a Negro, a member of the church, put himself into power, had a militia protecting him from the Klan. This the Black Panthers before the Black Panthers.
And started public education, and grew food, and built infrastructure. Like, wasn't just a little bit. He built a whole damn society. And this was before there was public education. And you know who was freaking cock blocking, getting in the way every single step of the way? Andrew Johnson's ass. Every single step. And it's because of that you get the black codes. It's because of that.
I think you mean Andrew Jackson, right?
Yeah. The president at the time.
Yeah.
Lincoln's vice president. Am I calling his last name wrong?
It's all to the good. Yeah, you talk about.
Andrew Johnson. Yeah,
Andrew Johnson. Okay,
yeah, that's Andrew Johnson. Yeah, he was the vice president of Lincoln, and so he was in charge after he was assassinated. That's what I'm saying.
You're right.
I thought it was Johnson. Andrew Jackson was the one that was the former military general that was going down there killing all the Native Americans and all that. Yeah. But he was again staunchly sympathetic to having white people, more specifically, keeping black men out of positions of power and authority. And if he didn't have his binary opposite in the form of Thaddeus Stevens, I linked information on him earlier, who was effectively the leader of the radical Republicans in the Congress, we wouldn't have gotten the three most important adjustments to the Constitution that are the entire reason why you and me can sit here and talk right now. It was during this time period that contextualizes United States history. And I make the argument that you don't have a nation until these three pieces of legislation are put in the Constitution, which is the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery and kept the North from having to pay the debt from the South. And number two, the 14th Amendment, which effectively redefines what a citizen means. This is how we get the birthright tradition in the United States to where your classification of a citizen is predicated on whether or not you were born here, and that's it, irrespective of what bloodlines you have, with the exception of Native Americans because they're their own sovereign entity. But if you aren't Native American and you're born here, you are classified as an American citizen because of that piece of legislation, followed by the 15th Amendment, which was put in place, again, to ensure that individuals that have that U.S. citizenship have the ability to vote regardless. And there's a key thing that was done with those pieces of legislation that puts us right in the face of states' rights. It was one of the first pieces of legislation that stated, irrespective of what goes down, the federal government maintains the ability to enforce that irrespective across the entire country, period. There had not been any piece of legislation that had the authority to do that yet, and they had to write that in. And I really want to emphasize that 14th Amendment because that's what's always brought into question, and that's how they've been using political judo to screw us over using it ever since they wrote it. By virtue of simply saying, by the effort it took to get that put in, they used those three pieces of legislation as the conditions under which states that had defected could rejoin the Union. It was the radical Republicans that made that a thing against Andrew Johnson's will. They said, you can't come join the Union again until and unless you sign and ratify these amendments to the Constitution. And it was so bad, and they were rebelling so hard against it that when it came time to vote for the 14th Amendment, you had Democratic senators that refused to show up and went into hiding. Some of them left the freaking country. Do you know that they had to actually send out posses to kidnap senators to force them into that voting session? And they missed it by one, actually. Because come to find out, one of those senators that was there wasn't even properly seated. And they had to redo the vote. And did you know that when they redid that vote, and I want you to really think about how precarious this is. When they redid that vote, did you know that they didn't even vote for it on the second time? And the only way it got the ride still is they said, nah, we just gonna go with the first vote. There's people to this day who refute the validation and justification of the 14th Amendment. I don't think people appreciate and understand how every bit of those black codes was being refuted by the efforts of these few Republicans that were in the Congress, aggressively being supported by Thaddeus Stevens, to undo those black codes and put in the Constitution all the work they were trying to do during the Civil War. That's what was at stake. Because if they didn't do that and they got to keep things status quo the way they were, remember what I said about the 3/5 compromise? You were facing a situation where not only were they going to keep their slave population, that the 3/5 compromise was null and void now because there are no more slaves, which means all the people that they circumvented using black codes to force them to make labor contracts to work on the property that they were in before as an agreement to not have to leave by virtue of General Sherman's special orders, they could count every person on that property as a full-blown individual, which meant that the South would have even more political power. And all they would need to do was go and revoke and revote over everything that they had done.
But at the same time, denying black folks the same basic rights as white people in that motherfucker.
Denying black men.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, because, that goes without saying. That's
right.
It's par for the course. Because, I mean, at this time, white women didn't even have the right to vote.
Right? Correct. And that, go ahead.
Let me just, look, I just want people to understand that the way power moves and shifts in this country, a lot of people, consider their liberty and their freedom to be attached to the voting process. I just beg to differ. First of all, you have to understand corporations. You have to understand the political machinations that occur with politicians and how they curry favor with corporations, because money makes everything move, man. We live in a fucking corporatocracy, bro, not a fucking democracy. All right. So, all this shit about, and white women have always had political power because political power in and of itself doesn't always take place inside of the context of a legislative hall. Now it does to some, but these women were able to fucking lobby and get legislation passed and push policy forth through bureaucracies and through legislation just by being able to court favor amongst the men that they were surrounded by. Now niggas ain't never had that power, bruh.
Nope.
We just don't have that kind of power. All right. So I just wanted to say that. So what I'm saying is policy can get initiated in a variety of different ways. Okay. But white women have always been there trying to block niggas from getting from being in power. Because I mean, this is what they do. It ain't just white dudes that we got an issue with. It ain't never just been white dudes. It's their whole culture. It's the whole society, men and women. But go forward, man.
It is because they all affected in different ways. You know, if white men represent the orthodox attack, then white women represent the unorthodox. And if you know anything about the art of war, those two swap and interchange ad infinitum. There's an infinite way you can assault your opponent by virtue of mixing the way of orthodox and unorthodox based on the condition of your opponent. And this is why we highlight Reconstruction, because this doesn't get taught in schools. This was a time period where Black people could finally demonstrate and exercise self-determination. And we did. It was under this space that we had to move, where legislative piece after legislative piece gave us an opportunity to counter that. That goes back to the legislation that Sandog was talking about earlier, where the South got split up into 5 different territories and Union troops were sent down to enforce the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And if that sounds like the Civil Rights Act of 1965, you'd be right. But that was actually written 100 years prior to that during Reconstruction at this exact same time, to say that Black folks were entitled to those civil rights, because everybody was trying to say they weren't. And the whole concept of states' rights argument stems from the fact that they didn't think that should be something that the federal government enforces.
So let me show everybody this shit right now, if I can. So we always talk about the civil rights movement in the scope and the range of the 60s. And I'm not talking about the 1860s, I'm talking about the 1960s, right? But there was a Civil Rights Act before that.
Yep.
Okay. So the first Civil Rights Act declared all persons born in the United States to be citizens without distinction of race, color, or previous condition of slavery or involuntary servitude. Although President Johnson vetoed the legislation, the veto was overturned by the 39th United States Congress.
Thaddeus Stevens. Yep.
Okay. So there was the first Civil Rights Act is 1866. All right, so you're right on that. I don't know why I interjected and said Jackson. I guess I was, I fuck up too. I'm human.
You was thinking about the Seminoles and John Horse.
but needless to say, this was a time, and this is why I guess, Sandog says when we were men, because we actually were allotted and afforded the opportunity to engage in political activity and economic activity just as every other man was in this country.
Yep.
I mean, of course, there were limits because we didn't have as much resources, but whatever we did have, we made do with it.
Well, on top of that.
But then what happened?
Yep, and that's where we get to the same song and dance. And it really starts with the death of Thaddeus Stevens, which is why I keep pushing this. He dies in 1868. Like at this time, he was warning everybody like, look, if you don't solve this issue and continue to push so that we can get this biracial government and just have it going forward, everything you did during the Civil War is effectively going to get returned and undone. And fortunately, one of the only things that happens as a result of this, because of, all this aggressive action that Andrew Johnson was trying to pull, he ends up getting impeached. And so it slows the steam down. But the problem is, as you get folks from the North that come through and try to enforce the policies of the radical Republican Congress, they get called carpetbaggers. And this is what Sandog was talking about earlier. They end up working in cahoots with individuals in the South that didn't agree with the scenario and were willing to work with folks from the North that were trying to ensure a smooth conversion into a biracial government. That's where you get those terms scallywags. They were the ones that were doing a lot of the Reformation, working with the Freedmen's Bureau, working with other offices out there that were discerning and disseminating resources so that people could continue to move forward. And you had these rogue factions of white vigilantism that disagreed with it. I think, what were they called themselves? The White League. It was the White League, the Red Shirts, and a couple other organizations that were former Confederate individuals that effectively weren't beaten. They aggregated in secret, they infiltrated organizations, they compromised people, and they conducted acts of terrorism on Black people, irrespective of where they were. And they were attacking white folks. They had special organizations that would find these political leaders, get at them in their sleep, murder them in their own house, and then chase them all throughout the country so they couldn't function in their official capacity and cut them off before they could actually work with Union troops again. And to me, this sounds a lot like how COINTELPRO does in the future, but I digress. We'll maybe get to that in another broadcast. But they function very similarly.
Yeah, so a scallywag ain't nothing but a Southerner who's a northern sympathizer. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I mean, that's what a scallywag is. So it's a negative connotation the term has. But for us, a scallywag is a fucking cool dude.
Yep.
So hey, we can work with the scallywags and the carpetbaggers.
Yep.
Yeah,
We can roll with them. We can work with them guys. They was on our side. But of course, you got guys that don't even understand the terms. They never really studied American history, don't really give a shit. To them, they guys take slices of politics without understanding the full breadth and the scope of politics in general, right? Or the total history of politics in the United States. To me, that's just quick-sighted. It's no different than a feminist just accepting and endorsing all the ideas about women's liberation without looking at the context out of which it all takes place. I think the problem is we don't have historiography.
Nope. Well, that's non-biased and clearly with an agenda to manipulate the story.
Yeah, we just don't have so ultimately what ends up happening though is the Union troops being in the South kind of enables a lot of Reconstruction to take place.
Yep.
Okay?
Yes.
But then guess what ends up happening?
Well, a few things.
The reconciliation. Okay? Because, at the end of the day, the North has to admit, like Abraham Lincoln said, look, if I can keep the slaves and create this and preserve the Union, I'll do that. If I gotta free the slaves to preserve the Union, I'll do that. But I don't think that these Black people are, of the same social ilk as us. And unfortunately, it's just the liberals turn their back on us, man, in order to reconcile with the South and to basically push forward with the measures or the efforts to bring the nation under one rubric. And here we are. So, and then it required the second Civil Rights Act, you know what I'm saying, of the 64 Civil Rights Act, right?
Let me tie this in a bow real quick because we're right there. And I can conclude on that because there's a lot more that happened. But ultimately what you see going down is by the time we get into the 1870s, basically all of the money that the North had spent on the war finally began to catch up with them. And they went into a massive economic crisis. And by this time, they were going back and forth for all of these years, almost a decade. Folks just got tired of it. So by the time we get to the next election, and we've got this whole, the country's tired of the conversation. They want to get back to regular operations like Gigi was saying. They made an agreement behind closed doors to basically say, look, Democrats, folks in the South, let the Republicans have the presidency, and we'll renege and pull back on Reconstruction. You can have it. They agreed to it. Troops were pulled out. And immediately after that, during 1877, just a few months after the election, you get the introduction of the greatest abuse of states' rights ever seen in this country, and the introduction and reinforcement of the black codes known as the Jim Crow era. And ever since then, we've been in a state of being re-enslaved, which does finally set the stage for the civil rights movement in 1865, like what's talked about. But the ultimate conclusion was that an alternative to men's suffrage, specifically black men's suffrage, was female suffrage. Because we understand that through social dominance theory, when you've got a group that's in the suppressed outgroup, the subordinate outgroup, the women within that classification are not going to be the disproportionate recipients of negative modalities of power the men are. And so if they can isolate the men by empowering the women, that gives them a default shot. Plus, that gives white women access to all of those resources that should have been redirected towards the black community by virtue of the Reconstruction rights. And that has been the policy in this country up until this day.
And look, I already gave you the game on this. Like Howard Smith, I think that was the name of the congressman who introduced into Title VII women in relation to race and ethnicity and religion. He added women to it. And he told you what his reason was. These people weren't hiding this shit. They said, well, okay, well, if black people are going to get these rights, well, what about the white women? What about the white woman that goes for a job and she's up against a black woman? Well, you know, like the Civil Rights Act, the way it's written up now, is going to give the preference to the black woman. Fuck that. I did a whole show on the shit. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, these people, man, they know how to utilize policy, law, and institutions to subvert the advancement of black folks. And now it's gotten to the point where you got black women saying that we want to be white men because we want to actually have the same kind of power afforded to everybody else in this fucking country.
Power, not supremacy, power, which they conflate the two. It's ridiculous.
Like, I mean, all you guys want to do is just be white guys. Like, what are you talking about? Like, all you motherfuckers want to be white dudes. That's all you motherfuckers want to do. But you're going to deny us the capacity because if we do it, all of a sudden we're savage, we're going to be brutish and start smacking people around. Because we don't have the ability to be civilized. And you see these kind of, you saw the shit, you saw the gay, what a trans black woman say, the same bullshit while conversing with Umar. Because they're magical. Like, what? Think about that shit, man. Think about growing up in a household, in a cultural environment where you're told you're dull and kind of flat, but this motherfucker here is Cinderella or some shit. She got a fairy godmother. Your ass, she's an elf. If you want to use Tolkien mythology or some shit, she's elfish. Right. You're orcish. Think about it. This
shout out to D&D too.
you are a regular human being. This motherfucker's a super mutant. They're magical. You're not. Because you're lazy and shiftless and you're conquered.
Sound pretty eugenics-like, right?
I'm just like, I don't understand how people don't see this and are really actually like haven't responded to it like a long time ago.
Because they've convinced themselves that black men have the ability to assert power over anything or anybody outside of maybe each other, to the point where they believe they're actually threatened by us with regards to that. Even though with the single accusation, they have the ability to take away everything from any black man at any moment. Boggles my damn mind.
So you don't want your father to have autonomy and capacity You don't want your son to have autonomy or capacity. You want it all for your damn self on the general assumption that all men are privileged. But you had white women that owned slaves, though.
42% and higher.
I just don't get it. I really don't understand it. But I guess I do understand it because it's the narratives that they put out there. It's the discourses and the scripts that they write. And the only understanding that you have is in accordance with the script. That's what the definition of hegemony really actually is. You're not able to think outside of the cultural script. And they've created a beautiful one, man. They created a grand design. Now, I ain't saying that women have not, to some degree, been, availed to all of the powers that white dudes have throughout the entirety of the United States history. But I mean, generally speaking, neither have white dudes as a whole. In the early 19th century, all white dudes didn't have the right to vote, man. Or am I mistaken?
Facts.
Like many of these motherfuckers was indentured servants, man. We already went into this, didn't we, Sandog?
Yes,
about how the slave was worth more and was often treated better than the white indentured servant. And they wanted to fucking violate the contracts between the European and the planter class. At least the planters did, because they didn't want to fulfill the terms of the contract. They didn't want to get this motherfucker no land and to set him up real nice, because that meant he's gonna lose money for himself. But the slave can keep on producing into perpetuity or generate a profit for the planter. So he's gonna make sure he's taking care of his asset. I'm pretty sure a lot of white dudes saw this shit and was like, man, fuck this. This nigga getting treated better than me. So, I mean, but at the end of the day, Baker's Rebellion, we talked about that, man, and how, black-white alliances didn't look good for the planter class. They were like, fuck that. We don't want to see that. We can see any coalition, but that coalition, we're not ready to see that. We don't want to see that. Because that's going to disrupt the money. That's going to disrupt the profit. And of course, you can't disrupt the profit. It's too much money. That's like a Nino Brown project popping off and somebody trying to disrupt the flow of it. That's working inside of the context of the system. They're like, man, fuck that. We have to quell this rebellion quickly. And they did quell it, but at the end of the day, the question then becomes, what now? Because everybody's going to say, well, that's ancient history. But it's really not ancient history to me, because, look, the modality that Nameless keeps talking about, the significant factor about all of this is being able to prevent your black ass, as a male, from having any significant amount of power. That's the facts. It came into play during the first wave of feminism. It came to play, during the whole fucking struggle for black liberation from the Civil War onward. But you saw it in feminine. You see it everywhere, man. All you do is see it. Unfortunately, now you see black women doing the same shit.
Sad
and basically ridiculing you for not doing what is in their best interest. Politically. They'll shame the shit out of you. Oh, you voting for them white people. Who the fuck you think Joe Biden is? This motherfucker was Ace Boone Coons with Strom Thurmond, man. Oh, he turned, well, Strom Thurmond, he changed, right? Like, you really believe that shit? I mean, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. So you mean to tell me this strict racial segregationist ass motherfucker, Archie Bunker type dude, all of a sudden changed his whole opinion? Now he's one of the good ones. And then Joe Biden is his understudy. Then later on, he comes up with the crime bill. Then you got Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both saying, we don't care what happened, what's the reason for it, any of that. What we know is they need to be brought to heel.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't Hillary a Goldwater girl?
And now here we are talking to black women. They saying we traitors because we ain't voting for the Democrats. Like we want to be white dudes. We got tiki torch. We like the tiki torch dudes or some shit.
You got Hillary in there having interviews with her daughter Chelsea with Meg Thee Stallion. I mean, all this looks like is nothing more than the gynocracy spelling itself out by definition. And this nonsense started on the damn plantation with her little handmaidens on the damn porch talking about what they gonna do and not do. I'm telling you, history repeats itself, fam.
And all I can tell you is, all I can say is, you know, like, get your booty to the pole.
Right.
I got hot sauce in my bag. You ain't black if you don't vote for me. Like, black men are supposed to hear that and say, what? Huh? You got a black man who comes up, well, I got a program for Black America. He gets on Fox Soul, you get a whole bunch of women talking about, where's the shit for black women in that motherfucker?
Aren't you black people? Nope.
No, that's not true. And then, as soon as we ask for something, the first thing they say is, well, that's unconstitutional. It don't include women and girls.
Oh, my God. Shout out to Dr. T. Hassan Johnson for the blackmail, the 14-point blackmail agenda. Please look at that if you haven't already. We're not getting anywhere unless we identify ourselves as our own political party because we're literally all we got.
I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be ignorant by saying what I'm saying, but I'm just trying to do is push the point forward. Specifically, you've been declared to be a problem within the confines of your own race. All of this shit that happened, like that's why you can say a motherfucker like, who was that one, the black woman from motherfucking Laughing Out Loud with Nick Cannon? I can't remember the show. Wilding Out. Talk about Martin Luther King Jr. He ain't a good person or some shit like that.
Yeah, B. Simone.
Like, bitch, who the fuck are you talking about? Like, so Kennedy wasn't good either because he was getting all kind of extracurricular pussy. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was getting extracurricular pussy. I mean, the most powerful men in the world, you expect for them not to get some extracurricular pussy, man. I'm just saying, like, I would think about it. Like George Washington didn't have like about 3 or 4 side bitches or something. Like Benjamin Franklin didn't have a whole bunch of motherfucking chicks, man. These are the most elite and powerful of men. Of course they gonna have a harem, bro.
But it's okay for her to plagiarize, mind you. But you know,
and it's okay for her to just jump from dick to dick to dick, and to take your resources while she doing it. That's okay. Like, oh, I want a divorce. Let me take your shit. Now I'm with a new guy. Oh, I ain't left him too. Now I gotta fucking chase after you so I can see my kids. And play Uncle Daddy and shit. And then you throwing my food on the street. Like, why don't you bring some more for everybody?
The Lilith doctrine. I can't, fam.
So this is the shit we talking about, man. All I can say is, bro, right now what we're actually dealing with, and I demonstrated, whatever black men propose contemporarily, I'm gonna tell you what is gonna happen. They're gonna say it's unconstitutional. It violates Title VII and Title IX. I guarantee you that's the pathway they're gonna take. And they've already done it. They did it with My Brother's Keeper. They did it with single-sex education. They're going to continue to say, well, if you don't give it to girls, then it's unconstitutional under the grounds that women are a minority. And white women are the ones who push this shit from the beginning. Now, that might be cool for white dudes. Not all white dudes either. Only a specific kind of white dude, an elite, well-off, upper middle class white dude. So you mean a white dude from Appalachia? That motherfucker is privileged?
Let them tell it.
Huh? Oh, well, you have cultural power. Like, huh? What kind of cultural power that motherfucker got?
Gynometry, fam. Multiplying by zero, hard as hell.
Like, I just, man, look, and I said this before, like, women have, like, if you're an elite woman, like, if you're the wife of a planter or a plantation owner, you think that motherfucking woman doesn't have more political power than a fucking indentured servant?
Correct.
Especially if she's educated. Especially if she comes from a well-off family that ensured that she was educated. And then most of the men die quicker than women anyway. So guess who inherits all the property and the estate?
That's exactly where I was going. Bingo. Bingo. Divorce court, same deal. I mean, you got records of it on paper. You can go right now and look at these damn records. And again, they showed how ultimately at a certain period, more women were owning slaves than dudes were in certain parts of the country. And it's for the exact same reason you just finished saying. But they oppressed.
Man,
again, women's suffrage was so black men didn't get it, period. And that is the pattern in this country.
These people, man, like these people are playing chess. We're playing checkers. Black men don't know how to respond to the feminist movement. They just don't. They have no idea. They don't know how to deal with soft power. It's not on their radar. They don't understand it.
Cool.
Soft power is finesse. It's like you got to be in the pimp game to understand finesse, I guess. I don't know. Like you like it's psychological operations as opposed to blunt force. You got a bunch of men who want to grab a sledgehammer instead of learning how to operate the steam drill. You got a bunch of guys who are ready to take up arms as opposed to, you know, basically developing a psychological operation campaign of their own. They don't understand counterinsurgency. None of that shit. So you got guys saying we need to resist against white folks. Like, okay, what we supposed to do? I'm not just being ignorant by saying this. I'm being honest. You niggas don't even know how to like be rebels in fight a guerrilla war. Don't even know.
Those of us
Even if it came even if it came down to it, the only people who would know how to do it is the Pookies. Am I wrong?
Nope.
The only niggas that would even offer up any chance are the Pookies.
And your veterans, but you already know what's happening there.
Man, they so fat caddish. You know, they don't want nobody to fuck with their benefits.
Yep.
No, I mean, I'm just being honest. I mean, but that's the difference between the veteran now and the veteran like from fucking like the civil rights era. Because them dudes was ready to bang. Like Huey P. Newton and them was veterans and shit. The Deacons of Defense was veterans. Am I wrong?
Again, that's why they were targeted by COINTELPRO. That's why you had the CIA run them drug missions through the community. I mean, Nixon himself came out and said, look, their problems were individuals that were anti-war and the military and the masculine arm of the Black Power movement.
Correct.
And they managed to sweep both of those by using drugs. They put our community and stuffed it full of daggone crack cocaine. And they distributed the both, and they were able to quell both movements in the same stroke.
Man, Huey P. Newton, man, died a crack addict, bro.
Yep.
That's just the facts, man. I mean, I hate to say it. That's just the truth. He was shot in a crack, doing over some crack shit.
Yep.
Right, but we got to hear some bootstrap rhetoric as to why that happened.
Oh, that nigga was just a George Floyd. Like, really? That's what he was, right? It's the reduction. People believe in scripts. They don't believe in the complexity of an individual. And that you can be two things at one time. Like, for instance, I mean, like, how much cocaine you think George Bush used? Not Herbert, but W. How much cocaine do you think he did?
Shout out to Camp David. God damn.
How much? Like, how many of these niggas, like, people are knock a crackhead, right? But how many of you do you know crackheads? Like straight up, like I grew up with this motherfucker. This motherfucker smoked crack. I know this motherfucker.
No.
They ain't all stupid, man.
Correct.
I'm just being honest. Like, I know some of these motherfuckers. They ain't all just dumb. And they ain't all like hyped up like Pookie from New Jack City.
No.
Some of these motherfuckers are more functional than you can imagine.
They know it was BS, fam. Sword Form 5. I brought it up in Sword Form 5 where I described the difference between force and power. And the reason why 1 with 10 is less than 10 with 1. Because all you got to do is delete that 1 that has that 10 and then all of a sudden you're done. If you delete that 1 on the same side of the equation, you still got 9 others to deal with. And if you don't have a culture that you can interface with to engage in these systems of power, keyword system, you're just setting yourself up to get deleted. And that's exactly what we experienced. And what's goofy is any lesser group of people would have been got deleted by now. And the fact that we're still here defies all logic and reason, if I'm frank about it.
So yeah, I think that today what black men need to do is to understand this is really a soft power game. It could turn into a hard power game, but I mean, for the most part, man, this is a soft power game, and men don't know how to respond to their training and their upbringing and socialization. They just don't have an answer for it.
Not like this.
And some black men like these dudes, man, creating videos and shit and leaving comments on Facebook to try to bring the attention of the federal government to us under grounds that we're like a terrorist threat.
Like some names you mentioned earlier.
Like, I'm serious. Like, are you serious, bro? Like, okay, so man, what them niggas need to realize, dudes like that, this is what they need to be what they need to realize, okay? You really should be worrying about your own safety, not your wife. Doing shit like that. I'm not trying to be ignorant because I ain't the one to go there, okay? But I'm just saying, them niggas need to be worried about their own safety, not their wife, not their daughter, doing shit like that and saying shit like that. And then not only that, bruh, you know how many niggas in the neighborhood, man, got guns and knives and shit and already out there fucking presenting the danger this very moment?
Many.
Dude, like, are you watching like videos and shit? Like, you got these niggas are making videos with multiple guns and cocaine and drugs and shit in the house. On camera, pointing guns at the camera, pop, 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 and making music and shit. And you want to point the finger at the Negroes in the manosphere like, oh, we represent an imminent threat to black folks. But you ain't got the heart to go talk to them niggas. Because that's what a homicide is. Black men between the ages of what and what? What? 15 and 26? That's what a murder is. But you ain't got the heart to go talk about them or talk to them motherfuckers. Because that's where, if you talk about somebody getting shot and killed, that's where it's going to come from. And guess where they grew up at, most of these motherfuckers? In an urban environment, in a single parent household. Am I lying?
Shout out to the Kerner Commission.
But the niggas in the manosphere represent an imminent threat. Like we grooming young boys to go out and start like the sniper on the highway. We want men to be on the highway just shooting at random cars with black women with hair weave in it or some shit. Man, these niggas are just ignorant, bro.
No, but damn that. Meanwhile, on the other side of the fence, you got people advocating openly for eugenic style language and ideas, such as aborting black male babies and having pictures of black men getting hung from trees. Talking about, I hope you die. Celebrating when black men get shot on TV, talking about he shouldn't have been there.
Didn't do
You can't
nothings.
find that language here.
Dusties and crusties didn't do nothings. That's all acceptable.
But no, they're not that big of a deal, right? They're not that big of a deal. It's not that bad. Ain't that many of them.
Bro, all we want to do is assessing and reflecting in real time on the shit that is happening to us. Because we haven't been taught to think about ourselves. We've been taught to think about everybody in the collective and to look at our own impropriety, but nobody else's. That's what we've been groomed to do.
Facts.
So I'm like, okay, well, if what we're doing, if free thinking is danger, well, motherfucker, be prepared for some more danger.
Just getting started, fam. Like this ain't nothing at all.
This is the tip of the iceberg. And these motherfuckers, these same pro-black niggas, they'll be the same ones that'll go tell the motherfucking white dude that some shit about to pop off. I swear to God, man. I believe it. I believe it 10,000%. You'll be the first niggas with Poppy on speed dial. No disrespect. I mean, but I believe that. These niggas is dangerous. What is a man supposed to be? He ain't supposed to be dangerous if there's a threat. Oh, he gonna present danger to weak people. Who's actually weak? Who's in the most vulnerable position? What's the metrics we're using to assess and to analyze who's vulnerable? Categories of oppression created by white women in the academy? Who used to own slaves?
Boggles my mind, fam.
Well, I'm done with it, bro. Like we at the 2-hour mark. We talked about Reconstruction to some degree, but I'm just talking about how it all carries forward to today. I think more than anything else, black men don't know what to do now. The only thing that they have to latch on to is middle class viability, working for white people, and just basically performing like the average white guy would. I mean,
that's the idea of success, Gigi, because there's a psychological term. I'd have to go to my friend who's a psychologist, but it's when people are oppressed, they may look at their oppressor's way as freedom or
Stockholm.
power.
Yeah, that's Stockholm syndrome.
Okay, so that's a part of Stockholm syndrome. So this is where it comes from, right? And to further break down this case, so for you guys, like again, Reconstruction and the next one, because Reconstruction is not the end of it, because now the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment are what's known as the Reconstruction Amendments. And so what you will see in American history is that from the moment you get those amendments, there has been constant efforts to goddamn roll back those amendments for the sake of the plantation. So those amendments have constantly been under attack. So once they were pushed through, they were immediately under attack. So going forward, the next phase that I wanted to talk about was I wanted to talk about the attacks on the 13th, 14th Amendment, both physical and legally. So going into the next one, we're gonna, God willing, Gigi, if you're free and everything else, we're gonna now, because we haven't left Reconstruction necessarily, because next what we're gonna do is we're gonna go into the Ku Klux Klan,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So yeah, so I'm gonna talk about I want to talk about the history of the Ku Klux Klan. So now you're still in Reconstruction, and so we're gonna go. So we're gonna slide now between Reconstruction and Jim Crow, and that's gonna be And the reason why that one is going to be a multiple parter is because remember, this involves, like I said, this is all money, right? So this involves education, this involves dating and mating, this involves access to housing. This is, you know, what I'm saying? Or as they say, all the active areas of life, right? And so the idea is, okay, so you got the Ku Klux Klan, and then so what I want to show you is that split between hard power and soft power, and how they come together and be used as smart power. So we're gonna do like the Ku Klux Klan. We're going to talk Jim Crow. We're going to talk the Great Migration. We're going to talk segregation, housing, you know, and all of that stuff. So if you have the time, Gigi, and so
Oh man,
that will
come
be,
on, bruh. And
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Nameless, you can join us if you want, man. It's on you,
yeah,
bruh.
man,
I
yeah,
appreciate
man,
that. It's just my schedule. If my schedule's open, I'll definitely want to participate
yeah,
on
man,
that because we need to draw those lines. And Sandog, what's the
yeah.
nickname of that 3K camp? What's their moniker they love going by and reminding people?
What the three K camp, the moniker that they remind people, it's the Empire, man. The South shall rise again.
The Invisible Empire.
Correct, man. And that's what the KKK was called. It's called the again. And so when you talk about soft power, again, so again, spoiler alert, right? Because there was a time where the KKK, a KKK member could be your pastor, the taxi driver, the guy you buy your sneakers from, everything. And even now within America, that's still a problem, right? And so that when you get into like military and paramilitary organizations, a lot of us who've been in the military will tell you that you've seen dudes who were in the United States Army who were still like, in militias, like, political groups, militias, Confederate flags, all of that stuff. So even in today's time, you have people who have these ideologies that are tucked into all levels of civil service in society. You know
Man.
what I'm saying? So yeah, so the Ku Klux Klan in and of itself is an excellent use of hard and soft power because again, at the end of the day, right? That's what it was called. It was called the invisible. It was called the invisible empire. And so and not to leave America. So there might even be some references also to the Third Reich and and all of that out of Germany as well. Like just like I said, just a comparison. So this is, like I said, this is where it gets a little bit heavier and meatier because what a lot of people don't know, and this is the frustration that Gigi has had, that Dr. T. Hassan Johnson has had, that the Nameless Protagonist and DC and the Codebreakers had. The frustration that many of you guys had is because again, the fact that a lot of people don't know the history. What happens is when you move closer into modern times or the civil rights era, again, like I said, that 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment is something that is constantly under attack. And so, again, so for those of us who are looking, because remember, right, a lot of us are looking for manhood, right? Positive identities and all of that other stuff. So everything that you said, like, middle class life and identifying with that, and everything else. And that's all because, again, that's all because we don't really know our own history in depth. Like I said, in depth in this country. So shout out to the Nameless Protagonist, where you are prisoners of war and you don't even know it,
Boy,
right?
that's the same thing that Neely Fuller and Francis Crest used to say all the time. Like and
Yeah,
Bobby Wright.
right.
Like these cats don't even like you don't even know that you fighting. You don't
Yeah,
even know that you're involved in what a genocide study scholar would probably call low level conflict. You don't even know it.
correct. Yeah,
You perceive it
yes, sir.
as all these niggas ain't doing nothing. Like Uncle Ruckus. Like you don't even know you're
Yeah,
involved in a struggle.
yeah,
You ain't even
uh,
organized. That's like, how could you be on a basketball court and not even know it's a game going on around?
yeah. Facts.
You on the court, but you don't even know you're supposed to be shooting a rock. The
Yeah,
basketball doesn't even look like a ball. It looks like something entirely different to you because you haven't been socially enculturated to understand that it's actually something that is used for sport.
again, shout out to soft power, right? And even Umar Johnson, and that's why I give him credit for, right? When he was talking about the one of the things that should be studied, like I said, in the community is military science, right?
Man,
That, like I said, that that is something that's something that should be studied because there are all types of things that you are constantly exposed to, a phenomena you're exposed to, and you have no idea what it is. Because again, it's like what Dr. T.S.R. Johnson says, right? You don't know the language or you don't know the language or the verbiage of it. So the closest that many people will get to is like dog whistles and stuff like that and everything else. But again, when you get into psychological warfare, all of that in and of itself is a skill set, man. Like these are like again, these are real. Like I said, these are real skill sets. And
Look,
so like
even in
yeah,
ninjutsu, we have a discipline we call Saijime no Jutsu, which
yeah,
stands for clouding men's minds. And that was the first and foremost weapon utilized when launching an attack on any opponent. In modern militaries, they call it psyops. That's why at the end of the day, I keep saying, and I repeat this mantra, status reports are not complaints, period. All we're
yeah.
doing is pointing out the observable reality in real time, like we said.
Correct. But the past, present, and future are all connected. So for anybody who's listening to this, back to what I told you before, any good strategist or tactician worth his salt is also a historian, even in mathematics. So, for example, when you're conducting statistics, right, the CDC, what are you collecting? You're collecting historical data.
Yep.
Like I said, so again, don't don't sit here and like I said, don't sit here and dismiss it. And also, what you have to understand as a human being too is, do you know how small amount of time 100 years is? Don't let somebody tell you 150 years ago was a long time ago. That's bullshit. 150 years. Like, look. I could walk up the street. Around the corner from me now are people who are in their 90s, right? You know what I'm saying? Here it is. I'm damn near. You know what? Gigi is what, a half a decade, right?
yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And everything else, man. 100 years is a fucking drop in the bucket, man. You know what I'm saying? Historically, like I said, historically speaking. So when people tell you that's a long time ago, bullshit. Because my grandmother was born in 1925, and guess what? I sat in 1925's lap. 1925 combed my hair. 1925 made me oatmeal and fried chicken and everything else.
I'm gonna tell you why.
Right?
It's the perception of time that people
Yeah.
have contemporarily because of technology. It's just our orientation to the world is everything has to move at a quick, innovative pace. But that's not how men haven't always lived that way. Every culture doesn't live that way, right?
Yeah.
We got to constantly be made. This is why Heidegger said there's a problem with the technological mode of being. But I don't want to get into that. But what I do want to do is thank you for coming. Appreciate you, Sand Dog, and appreciate you, Nameless Protagonist. You're both, of course, always welcome. I always got time and space for you guys. But the next thing I want to do is, I think, at some point, I still got to get to I'm Just Jules and this idea of Republican motherhood, and I want to get through. I want to get to Black people in medieval Europe.
Ah, the Moors.
Ah,
Yeah.
I got to get to
yeah.
Black, and the reason why I want to get it to Black people in medieval Europe is because there's a lot of television shows right now, like The Rings of Power, which I don't really like. I think it's a Mary Sue show, and I think the writing is bad. I think the special effects are awesome, but also you got the House of the Dragon. All of these, like all of these fantasy shows are beginning to interpolate different kind of people from different ethnicities into Europe, because like fantasy is just the projection of white homogeny. Okay,
Yep.
that's the way I perceive it. But I mean, the reality is that Europe has never been an absolutely homogeneous population of people. It never has been.
Correct.
Like, I mean, you got like black knights and shit, like African knights. You got the Moors in Spain, and
You got
like
Black Crusaders in Nubia.
Correct.
Man, these people don't know their own history though. That's because they're indoctrinated with their own ideology as well. They like the fantasy, the whole fantasy, community. Them motherfuckers really actually believe that there was a pure and homogeneous Europe.
I blame
And that
Token.
shit-
I blame Token. I blame Token. I blame Token.
Like, look, I blame all of these motherfuckers, they've taken on like, this idea of white superiority and like the purity of medieval Europe and the purity of, just the Germanic tribes in general. But, my thoughts on it are white people like take the white phenotype that they've created like within the modern era and use it backward looking in order to make an evaluation of different cultures all throughout the world and throughout time. Like, for instance, I'm about to leave after this, but for instance, white people sitting in a university classroom right now, they'll study Western civilization, okay? And they'll connect all of these different kind of cultures into one hodgepodge of whiteness. So they'll start off with like Greece. They'll move from Greece to Rome. They'll move from Rome to Europe. And then they'll move from that to the New World. And to them, it's all part of their culture. Like, it's all one big culture. But I mean, think about what the Romans thought about the barbarians, the Germanic tribes. They wrote about the shit.
They were trash.
They wrote about them people, man. They said these motherfuckers are savages. They're barbarians.
You know what's funny, Green Gorilla? I have a homeboy, right? And a homeboy of mine, and he's from Greece, right? And so again, it was the same thing, like with the fantasy thing. And he and I was having this conversation. So he's talking about, the race bending of characters and everything else. And I said, fam, you are a descendant of the Roman Greco Empire. He said, correct. And I said, okay, that's cool. They took this character, made it a black guy, took that character and made it a woman. And I asked her, what did your ancestors think of the British? And he said, not highly of them. And I said, then how come every time I see a damn film about the Roman Empire or Greco-Roman society, they have British accents?
Crickets.
I said, so, and he couldn't give me an answer. And I was like, so you're complaining about the fact that there's a black Spider-Man, for example, when the very people that your ancestors subjugated now have come to claim their legacy all based on skin color. Make that make sense?
And they ain't even got the same skin color.
Correct.
Like it ain't no gradations of white pasty skin or some shit like that. It fucks me up, these people, man. Like, I swear to God, like I had a conversation with a Latino. That's what he called himself, right? Latino, right? And this, like, I have been to prison, so I'm in prison talking with this guy, right? And he was popping off at the mouth about Latino culture, this, Latino, that. I say, man, do you know what the word Latino is derivative of? Like, you know the etymological root of the word Latino? He's like, what you talking about, Holmes? I'm like, look, Latino is etymologically derived from Latin, right? Now, Latin was the official language of Rome, right? Are your fucking ancestors from Rome, motherfucker? When he said that, when I said that, his fucking head was about to explode. This is a Latino dude, criminal, tough guy, whatever. But I didn't give a fuck. I'm here to tell you the truth. Like, you speaking a slave language. Spanish is a fucking slave language for your people, bro. Y'all done been ran through like niggas. That's not your language, bro. Y'all Native Americans for real, mixed in with white motherfuckers, the Spaniards. You motherfuckers ain't pure. Y'all walking around this bitch like I'm a Latino. I'm like, well, Holmes, you speaking slave language, my guy. You speaking Spanish, man. Spain is not fucking Latino like you think of it. That's a European fucking country. Like, did Augustus Caesar look like a fucking Mexican, bro?
No.
Look, they even go so far as to call Spanish Moorish Latin, which should tell you all you need to know when you look at the Moorish occupation in that region, because a lot of those portions were even considered part of Africa. But all you got to do is look at the language, because the words speak for themselves. And if the words don't do it, the music will.
Bruh, them people, man, they keep, that's what they call it, keeping the grandmother in the closet.
Facts.
The abierto or whatever they call it, keep her ass in the closet. Keep grandma in the closet, man. Don't bring her out, man.
They're not ready. Look, they've been doing this since the Renaissance era, and they started doing that back up again when eugenics started getting popular. So it's the same pattern they used to doing, this whole reinventing themselves and rewriting history that suits their visual narrative. Nothing new. I'm sure you'll break that down. I'll be looking forward to that, definitely.
Yeah, I got to talk about that, man, because these motherfuckers popping off like, I just hate the wokeism, which I don't like wokeism either. But, you know, like, to act as if, you know, there's some ideological, pure Europe, white, all-white Europe. Like, come on, bro. Like, that shit never existed. Motherfuckers done ran through your shit, too. Yeah, the abuela. That's what I meant to say, Kareem. I fucked up, as I do often. So thank you for correcting me on that shit. But anyway, y'all be good, man. Exactly, Trail. Yeah, Spanish is a romance language. I told him that shit, too. Yeah, what you think? What's romantic is derivative of Rome as well. So, yeah, there you go. But anyway, man, y'all be good, man. I'm glad to have been able to do 2 shows this fine day. Now I'm about to watch that fantasy bullshit, The House of the Dragon, in a minute.
Oh man, I gotta go watch that woman BS now and do some notes on that. I'm gonna be dissecting that nonsense.
Man, I gotta watch it. You know, I have to watch it because I have to be able to assess it. You know what I'm saying? But
well, that's that soft power we were talking about.
Yeah, bro. They coming with it too, boy. These people, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, man.
Yep.
And you know what's hot? You know what's hot? You will never. I'll be shocked. To never say never, but I will be shocked if you got another Shaka Zulu film. And if you did get a Shaka Zulu film, then they will probably more than likely elevate his mother. Because, you know, again, you know, his mother to some extent was involved in his leadership, you know what I'm saying, of the Zulu kingdom. But I don't think that you would ever get a Shaka Zulu film, a Mana Matampa, a Mansa Musa. You hang it up.
But you know what though? It's up for us to make them films and the jockey for their creation. But here's the thing. My problem ain't with black women being involved in offices of power. My problem is black women who are dumb and don't know how to fucking solve power works, trying to be in positions of power for the ideology of the oppressor, using their rhetoric and their logic. We need some motherfucking black women who know what the game is. Like, would love to have, you know, somebody with the knowledge of a Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, a Frances Cress Welsing, and a Lane Brown, a Kathleen Cleaver, you know, like back when they were thinking radical, or a Marimba Ani, or, you know, a Donna Richardson or something like that. But these motherfuckers, they done sold out. They sold out for some hog maws, some chitlins, and some pig feet, bro.
Facts.
So anyway,
blame
man,
you for it. Appreciate it, fam. Go ahead.
Good conversation, fellas, man. I know y'all got things to get to, so holla at you. Nameless, rude to the bruvs. I'll holler at y'all next time.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Peace.